This week on Ask a Farmer, I answer Paul's second question about how many pigs you can stock on 2 acres and what kind of shelter they need, coming up. So last week I answered Paul's question about what kind of fence he should install, how he should install it, some things to consider, gave him some stuff to think about. His other question was, how many pigs can he run on 2 acres out in the woods? And what kind of shelter does he need based on that stocking density? And we actually did a podcast about this very subject. It's been a while ago now, but kind of a little microcosm of like how many pigs can you run on 1 acre and how much money can you make. And we'll link that podcast down below in the show notes. But basically, kind of what we've come up with is that, you can run 4 or 5 or 6 pigs per acre if you're rotating them around, if you've got some, pretty decent understory, some pretty decent stuff in there. And Paul sent in some photographs of his woods, and it looks pretty daggone similar to what I have here. So, if you're moving these guys around, yeah, sure, they're going to go in and they're going to dig some stuff up and they're going to start to kind of clear out that understory. But what's going to happen is that's actually going to let some of the grasses and stuff propagate, particularly if you've got some dead trees, or maybe you go in and do a little bit of selective thinning to let some sunlight into the woods. You're actually going to get more grasses to grow out in the woods to give them some additional food. So my basic rule of thumb is, in a deciduous forest like this, 4, 5, 6 pigs. Early on when they're little, a quarter of an acre is going to last them a long time. You might have them in an area for 2 or 3, 4 weeks when you first get them, if they're little bitty guys, like 40 pounds or so. As they get bigger, you're going to have to rotate them more frequently. Now, couple that with what kind of shelter do they need. And we do have shelters for our pigs. Early on, I started out doing no shelters because somebody said, hey, you can raise pigs without shelters. And what I found out is that pigs, well, they're like human beings. They can succumb to respiratory infections very, very easily. That is their Achilles heel, particularly when you have a 4-season climate like I do here, and you're trying to raise pigs in the spring, and you're trying to run them into the fall or maybe even the early winter to get them done. Pneumonia is a big deal. It's a real big deal, and they need to be up off the ground, and they need to be dry, and they need to have some bedding as it gets colder. So what we've done is we've built some different shelters out in the woods, and kind of, again, a bit of a rule of thumb, and this is more for an adult pig, but I like for my pigs to have about 8 to 12 square feet per animal. So if you can imagine a 2x4 or a 3-foot by 4-foot area, and that's pretty generous. In a shelter, well, that gives you a pretty good idea of what you need. So if you've got, say, an 8x12 shelter out there, that's 96 square feet. That's going to be plenty big enough for like 8 pigs, probably 10 pigs, and if they're a little bit smaller, maybe even up to a dozen pigs. And guess what? You couple that's running 4 or 5 or 6 pigs per acre, and that's really all you need. So if you had a shelter that you could, kind of maybe put out in the middle of this 2-acre area, Paul, or if it's something you wanted to move around, that would also work. That will work very, very well for you to have a shelter for your pigs. So that's my answer this week on Ask a Farmer. Hey, if you've got a question you'd like answered, please send it over to me, Darby at grassfedlife.co, and I'll be happy to answer it for you. Until next week, thanks for watching, and keep those questions coming in. Take care.